There was a moment in drag racing when banning a car wasn't enough praise. So the NHRA changed the rulebook itself.
In 1966, drag racing changed forever. The smell of gasoline filled the air. The engine screamed, but nothing prepared the crowd for what rolled out of Doug Nash's trailer that day. It was not a muscle car, not a dragster. It was a Ford Bronco AFX, nicknamed the Bronco Buster, with its 427 cubic inch V8 engine and a lightweight fiberglass body. It tore down the quarter-mile faster than anything the NHRA had ever seen. Officials froze, fans went wild, and the rulebook, it suddenly felt useless. This machine did not break the rules, it made the rules look weak, and that was the moment the NHRA had enough. Doug Nash's vision and the birth of the Bronco Buster. Before the Bronco Buster shook the drag strips, Doug Nash was already known as one of the boldest minds in racing. He was not a millionaire engineer or a corporate-backed driver. He was a hands-on innovator, a man who believed that creativity could beat money and power. By the early 1960s, Nash had earned respect as both a skilled driver and a mechanical genius. But by 1965, he was frustrated. The National Hot Rod Association NHRA rulebook had turned predictable. Everyone built the same kind of cars, using the same tricks, the same engines, and the same body shapes. Nash wanted to do something completely different. One night in his workshop, staring at the bare frame of a small Ford Bronco, he had an idea that sounded crazy even to him. What if a short, boxy off-road body could be transformed into a drag racing monster? A machine with the heart of a 427 cubic inch V8, the lungs of pure nitromethane, and a body light enough to fly. Everyone told him it was impossible. The NHRA classes were designed for production cars, not trucks, not Jeeps, and definitely not Broncos. But Nash saw a loophole. The rulebook did not specifically ban such combinations, and that was enough for him. He teamed up with Ford's experimental division, sourcing factory-grade performance parts and the same 427 cubic inch high-riser engine used in legendary drag Fords like the Thunderbolt. The body was molded in fiberglass, stripped of all unnecessary weight, and bolted onto a custom chassis for perfect balance. When he finally stood back and looked at what he had built, a lifted square-shaped Bronco designed to crush quarter-mile times, even Nash had to laugh. It looked ridiculous, but he knew it was going to change everything, and it did. The moment he started the engine for the first time, the floor of his garage trembled, and so would the future of drag racing. The first race, when the NHRA saw the monster in action. It was a hot summer afternoon in 1966, when Doug Nash decided it was time to unleash his creation. The crowd at the National Hot Rod Association NHRA event had no idea what was coming. They expected shiny muscle cars, Mustangs, Fairlanes, and Barracudas. But when Nash rolled to the line in a bright red Ford Bronco AFX, people burst out laughing. A Bronco? On a drag strip? It looked like a joke. Then the light turned green. The 427 cubic inch V8 engine roared to life with a sound that shook the stands. In a split second, the Bronco Buster leaped off the line, its front tires lifting off the ground, tearing through the quarter-mile faster than anyone expected. The laughter stopped instantly. Within seconds, the Bronco crossed the finish line, leaving behind professional-built drag cars that were supposed to dominate. Spectators stood in shock. The announcer stuttered, barely believing what he had seen. This lifted, box-shaped Ford just outran factory teams and top-tier racers. People were not cheering for the winner anymore. They were cheering for the wild Bronco that broke every expectation. In the control booth, NHRA officials exchanged nervous looks. The car did not break a single written rule, but it clearly was not what they had intended drag racing to be. Some called it unfair, others called it genius. But one thing was clear. Doug Nash had found a loophole, and he had driven right through it at full throttle. The Bronco Buster became an instant legend. Photographers surrounded it, magazines wanted to feature it, and fans begged to see it run again. Yet, deep inside the National Hot Rod Association NHRA headquarters, a question was being whispered. If one man can do this, what happens when others follow? That question marked the beginning of a quiet war between innovation and regulation, the rise of the Bronco Buster. Fame, fear, and controversy. After its astonishing debut, the Ford Bronco AFX Bronco Buster became the talk of every drag strip in the United States. Fans lined up not just to see a race, but to witness a phenomenon, a boxy off-road truck dominating factory-built superstock and factory experimental competitors. Every launch was a spectacle. The 427 cubic inch V8 engine screamed, tires burned rubber, and every quarter-mile finish left jaws on the ground. Yet fame came with fear. Officials from the National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, grew increasingly uneasy. This machine had exploited every loophole, bending the rules without technically breaking them. How could a single racer redefine what was legal in the sport? They debated, argued, and studied the Bronco Buster's every specification. Its fiberglass body, lightweight modifications, and altered wheelbase challenged the very definition of superstock. Rival racers were torn between admiration and frustration. Some envied Nash's audacity, others feared it would ruin the competition. Questions circulated in garages and pit lanes. Could anyone stop it? Was it even fair to race against such a machine? The controversy spread beyond the tracks, into newspapers and automotive magazines. Meanwhile, Doug Nash enjoyed the chaos he had created. He had not only built a car that could dominate, but one that commanded attention and forced conversation. Every race became a spectacle of engineering ingenuity versus bureaucratic control, and the whispers from NHRA offices grew louder. How long before we have to intervene? The Bronco Buster was no longer just a car. It had become a symbol of innovation, rebellion, and the delicate tension between rules and creativity in American drag racing. Its legend was not only in its speed, but in the way it unsettled the sport itself, leaving everyone wondering, what can possibly stop this? The dominance of the Ford Bronco A/FX Bronco Buster could not be ignored. By late 1966, the National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, found itself facing a dilemma. A car that followed the letter of the law, but destroyed the spirit of fair competition. Officials knew they had to act, but how? Banning innovation outright was impossible. The Bronco Buster exploited a loophole, and technically, nothing it did was illegal. Inside the NHRA offices, meetings stretched late into the night. Engineers, race directors, and rulemakers debated the implications of Nash's creation. The Bronco Buster's fiberglass body, altered wheelbase, and lightweight modifications meant traditional superstock classifications no longer applied. They asked themselves, if one man can do this, what will happen when dozens follow? The future of drag racing hung in the balance. New rules began to take shape. Minimum body production requirements were reconsidered. Altered chassis and experimental lightweight modifications were scrutinized. NHRA officials even discussed whether trucks or Jeep-style bodies should be allowed to compete at all. The Bronco Buster had forced them to confront questions they had avoided for years. How much engineering creativity should the sport permit? Where is the line between fair advantage and outright exploitation? For fans and rival racers, the tension was electric. Every event became a spectacle not only of speed, but of politics, controversy, and the unfolding battle between ingenuity and regulation. Nash's car had shifted the power dynamic. Now, the NHRA was reacting to a racer rather than dictating the terms. The Bronco Buster had done more than win races. It had shaken the foundations of drag racing. One car, one vision, and suddenly, the rulebook was no longer a guarantee of fairness. The NHRA had to adapt, whether they liked it or not. Legendary quarter-mile performances, breaking every expectation. The Ford Bronco A/FX Bronco Buster was more than a spectacle. It was a force of nature on the quarter mile. Every time Doug Nash dropped the clutch, the car seemed to defy physics. Its 427 cubic inch V8 engine screamed to life, and the lightweight fiberglass body practically flew down the strip. The crowd held its breath as the Bronco Buster left competitors in a blur of smoke and dust. One particularly legendary race at the National Hot Rod Association NHRA event in Indianapolis became the stuff of drag racing folklore. Nash's Bronco Buster launched from the line with a violent burst of speed. Tires peeled off the asphalt as if they had minds of their own. The car crossed the finish line in a time no other superstock or factory experimental vehicle could touch. Even seasoned drivers could not hide their shock. How could a Bronco defeat a purpose-built muscle car? Fans watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Cameras clicked furiously, trying to capture the impossible. The Bronco Buster's quarter-mile domination became more than just winning races. It was a demonstration of pure engineering audacity. Every pass added to its legend, reinforcing the idea that Doug Nash had built not just a car, but a machine that forced the sport to reconsider its limits. Questions circulated among the NHRA officials. Is this still fair competition? Can anyone stop it? Should we revise the rules before more racers attempt the same trick? These were not hypothetical questions, they were urgent. By the end of the season, the Bronco Buster had rewritten expectations. It proved that ingenuity could triumph over convention, that a single visionary could challenge an entire organization, and that speed alone was not enough to earn respect. Sometimes, you needed to break every expectation to leave a mark. As the Ford Bronco A/FX Bronco Buster dominated the quarter mile, reactions from rival racers were a mix of fear, respect, and outright disbelief. Many competitors had spent years perfecting their superstock and factory experimental vehicles, relying on tradition and factory-backed parts. Then came Doug Nash, with his lifted fiberglass Bronco body and a 427 cubic inch V8 engine, tearing through the strip as if regulations did not exist. Some rivals whispered in the pits, "This is not fair. How can we compete against a truck that flies like a dragster?" Others nodded in grudging respect, recognizing the ingenuity behind Nash's design. It was impossible to ignore the Bronco Buster had reshaped the competitive landscape. Its success was not just in speed, but in the boldness of its engineering. Meanwhile, the National Hot Rod Association, NHRA officials, grew increasingly concerned. The car exploited every loophole in the rulebook without technically breaking a single law. Altered wheelbase, lightweight fiberglass body, and modified suspension combined to create a vehicle that challenged the very essence of fair competition. Officials debated whether future races would allow similar designs, knowing that letting others copy Nash's approach could spiral into chaos. Fans, however, loved every moment. They cheered for audacity, for rebellion, for a car that seemed alive with personality. The Bronco Buster became a symbol of creativity triumphing over convention, and every race added fuel to the legend. Newspapers, magazines, and radio broadcasts spread the story nationwide. The truck that could had become the car that forced the NHRA to confront its own rules. Even today, the tale of rivalries, awe, and controversy reminds us that innovation often walks hand in hand with resistance. And in 1966, one lifted Bronco proved that speed was only half the story. Daring to challenge authority was the other half. Behind the wheel, Doug Nash's driving techniques. Driving the Ford Bronco A/FX Bronco Buster was not like piloting any other car on the drag strip. Behind the wheel, Doug Nash had to master a machine that defied conventional physics. With its 427 cubic inch V8 engine, producing enormous power, and a lightweight fiberglass body that shifted weight unpredictably, every launch required precision, timing, and instinct honed over years of experience. Nash developed a unique style. Unlike traditional racers who relied on sheer reaction time, he learned to anticipate the Bronco Buster's tendencies. The front tires lifted at launch, the rear tires clawed for traction, and the car could fishtail if he applied too much throttle too quickly. Nash adapted, using subtle steering adjustments and a delicate foot on the gas pedal to maintain control while extracting maximum speed. Fans and competitors often wondered how he made it look effortless. But every run was a calculated balance between daring and discipline. Nash treated the Bronco Buster almost like a partner, understanding its quirks and exploiting them to dominate the quarter mile. He knew exactly when to shift, how to manage tire spin, and how to use the lightweight body to his advantage in every class he entered. This driving mastery became part of the car's legend. The Bronco Buster was not just a mechanical marvel, it was an extension of Nash himself. Without his skill behind the wheel, the car's extreme modifications might have been a liability rather than an advantage. It was his vision, engineering, and driving combined that forced the National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, to reconsider the rules and ultimately rewrite them. For Nash, the Bronco Buster was more than a car. It was proof that innovation and skill together could defy even the strictest regulations. The rulebook rewrite, how NHRA responded. The unprecedented dominance of the Ford Bronco A/FX Bronco Buster forced the National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, to act. Officials realized that one car had exposed loopholes in the superstock and factory experimental classifications that could no longer be ignored. If the Bronco Buster was allowed to continue unchallenged, the sport risked losing credibility, fairness, and control. In late 1966, NHRA engineers, race directors, and rulemakers convened emergency meetings. They scrutinized every aspect of the Bronco Buster, the fiberglass body, the altered wheelbase, the custom lightweight chassis, and the 427 cubic inch V8 engine. The conclusion was clear. The car was legal, but its very existence challenged the intent of the rulebook. New rules were drafted to close the loopholes. Minimum production requirements for superstock vehicles were introduced. Altered chassis and exotic lightweight body materials were strictly regulated. Even the idea of trucks or Jeep-style bodies competing in traditional drag classes was reconsidered. The NHRA wanted to ensure that no single innovator could dominate by exploiting gaps in the system. For fans, these changes were controversial. Some saw them as necessary to maintain fairness. Others criticized the NHRA for stifling creativity and punishing innovation. For Doug Nash, the Bronco Buster had achieved exactly what he intended. It had forced the governing body to confront its own limitations and recognize the potential of fearless engineering. The rulebook rewrite marked a turning point in drag racing history. One car, one driver, and one vision had compelled the National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, to rethink the sport from the ground up. The Bronco Buster was no longer just a racer. It had become a symbol of rebellion, ingenuity, and the constant tension between rules and creativity. The Ford Bronco A FX Bronco Buster left a mark on drag racing that went far beyond its quarter-mile victories. Its success forced the National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, to rethink rules, but it also inspired generations of racers and engineers to embrace bold innovation. Suddenly, creativity mattered as much as horsepower, and unconventional designs could challenge traditional norms. Many racers studied the Bronco Buster, analyzing its lightweight fiberglass body, custom chassis, and powerful 427 cubic inch V8 engine. Some incorporated similar principles into their own vehicles, experimenting with altered body styles, weight reduction techniques, and performance modifications. Nash had unintentionally sparked a wave of ingenuity that transformed superstock and factory experimental classes. Magazines, radio shows, and automotive enthusiasts chronicled the Bronco Buster's victories. It became a legend, not only because it won races, but because it symbolized defiance, the idea that one visionary could bend the rules without breaking them. Fans remembered the sight of a boxy Bronco leaping off the line, leaving muscle cars in its wake, as a defining moment of 1966. The NHRA's rule changes became a permanent reminder that the sport needed to balance fairness with innovation. Without the Bronco Buster, drag racing might have remained predictable, dominated by factory-backed machines. Instead, Nash's creation encouraged experimentation, showing that passion, intelligence, and courage could challenge authority and inspire evolution in the sport. Even decades later, the Bronco Buster is cited as a turning point in drag racing history, proof that speed alone is not enough and that true legends are created when rules meet rebellion on the track. The Ford Bronco A FX Bronco Buster became more than a car, it became a legend. Fans cheered every launch, magazines chronicled its victories, and radio shows replayed its dominance. Its daring design and incredible speed inspired admiration and debate, cementing its myth as the vehicle that challenged authority and changed drag racing forever. The Ford Bronco A FX Bronco Buster showed that innovation and courage can rewrite history. Doug Nash's daring design forced the National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, to change the rules forever. Its legend inspires racers and fans even today. If you enjoyed this story of speed, rebellion, and genius, subscribe for more tales of classic cars and drag racing history.